so I think we're ready. The title of my talk today is It Really All God? As I was getting this talk ready, I realized that I had already given a talk with this name. And apparently it's a question I'm paying a lot of attention to. So I'm going to rename this talk Is It Really All God? Version 2, The Power of Acceptance. At Joyful Gathering, we speak all the time about healing. And in our daily lives, are we not always talking about and are concerned with healing in one form or another? Either for ourselves or others. Whether it's healing from childhood trauma or other past experiences, or healing related to current situations, health conditions, or relationships in our lives that are difficult or challenging. The inevitable knocks on our door, or knocks over our heads, that are knocks from the universe, are first inviting us to identify that healing is necessary, and second, becoming the pathway to healing itself. These knocks open us to the awareness that we need to be paying attention to something that we have not seen or that we have been overlooking. And when we recognize them as such, they become the opportunities for healing that we have come to this plane of existence to know. The opportunities that allow us to continue to evolve as spiritual human beings. These are the opportunities that are meant for us to deepen into the understanding that there is no separation, no duality, that it is all God and it is all for us. In the words of Ernest Holmes, a realization of the presence of God is the most powerful healing agency known to the mind of man. We are both and, spiritual beings having a human experience during whatever period of time that we are given while we occupy these bodies in physical form. We know this. We also know that as spiritual beings having a human experience, that the physical experience, while not to be denied, is also real, but that is not the truth of who we are as spiritual beings. But this can be both confusing and difficult to navigate at the same time. It has been for me, and I struggle with it daily sometimes. I'm always looking for ways to better understand this. So it's important to remember that those human parts of us do not need to be changed or pushed away or denied. They play an important role in our healing. Our humanity is the very attribute that brings our attention to the need for healing, and as such, it is the catalyst for healing. As we work through the discomfort, the trials, and the tribulations that come with life, we are pushed forward on this spiritual evolutionary journey. We are challenged and pushed forward through human experiences of pain, fear, anxiety, dis-ease, and so forth. So these experiences, though we prefer not to have them, are God working in our lives too. Not only that, they can become the means through which ultimate healing takes place. This happens when we come to the realization that we are at the very core, perfect, whole, and complete. The physical and the spiritual are absolutely intertwined in this inquiry that we make today about acceptance. I began attending Vince D. Pasquale's free lectures at the starting point that was our Joyful Gathering home for many years, before I found Joyful Gathering. And I was struggling in my role as mother, how to best serve my son who was caught up in the throes of addiction. At the same time that I was attending those lectures in order to help him, I knew that the greater part of my choosing to be there was my need to return to 12-step programs for myself. I also knew that I could best help my son by paying attention to my own recovery rather than his. Vince said something that at the time I suppose I was ready to hear. Things come to us and stick with us when we are ready to hear. And no matter how many times we may have heard something in the past, they come to us in the right and perfect time. Anyway, Vince said at the time that addiction is fundamentally a spiritual disease. I took this to mean that addiction is a spiritual disease as opposed to a physical or emotional one. that had more weight in my mind. I thought this was an either-or thing. And it was during this time that I began to understand that the ultimate point of disease development, be it physical or emotional, is certainly to heal, but that the real lesson, the real point, is to understand that the reason for its manifestation in the first place is because of a spiritual disorder, and not so much because of a physiological one. It has become clearer and clearer to me over time that the physical or emotional healing that we are continually seeking is always connected to a spiritual healing that is necessary. And come to think of it, of course, this is why we do affirmative prayer and why it works. Prayer works because we are treating for cause by affirming the spiritual truth of who we are. So in other words, the only true way to heal whatever part of the human experience it is that is calling for healing is to heal the spiritual parts of us that we perceive as broken or missing. My point here is that the physical is ever pointing us toward the revelation of the spiritual, and that, my friends, is why we have come to this physical plane. This is the ultimate point of life and purpose of life, to heal and to be healed, and to understand who and what we are as spiritual beings. Today, through the lens of acceptance, we will not only explore ways in which we can frame and reframe dealing with and navigating our humanness, but we will more clearly understand that its purpose is to lead us to know our true identity as spiritual beings. It is all God, it is all good, and it is all for us. Before we begin, I just want to mention that one of the biggest things that drew me to Joyful Gathering and our teachings was the fact that I could begin to understand how to apply spiritual life to my life in a practical way. And we often speak of this here. We talk about living life based on an applied spirituality that teaches us how to in our daily lives. And we all know that our daily lives can include many things that are challenging. As Reverend Margaret has often said, it can be spirit expressing as those 2x4s that sometimes hit us over the head that bring about our greatest growth and healing. For me personally, acceptance has enabled me to get through and come out on the other side of many situations with increasing awareness and understanding, with the ability to have and to hold both love and fear, peace and pain, joy and sorrow, and so forth. There are many ways to accomplish this. We have many tools. Today, I want to speak specifically about the powerful and transformative tool, acceptance. Our daily lives can include fatigue, stress, and when we don't have control over what is going on around us, we often struggle to meet the demands of work, family, financial responsibilities, health concerns, and so forth. We have many things in our tool bag that may include meditation, spiritual reading, connecting with like-minded friends like we do here on Sundays, prayer, communing with nature, and so forth. I suggest that acceptance is also a tool. It is not just a tool, but it is a practice. Acceptance allows us to be both and, where we are not denying any part of the self, the human nor the divine. And through acceptance, we can embody both peace and pain at the same time. And at this intersection of the human and the divine, we can live a practical spirituality, acknowledging both discomfort, pain, dis-ease, without having to give up any of our peace, love, joy, or serenity. So let's break this down. First, what is acceptance? Acceptance is about letting go of preconceived notions or scripts. It's about non-resistance and non-attachment to a particular outcome. It's about trying things on to see if they fit. It's accepting without needing to change something and seeing what happens. It's about being grateful. And if you're having difficulty with this process or when all else fails, it's about just simply being curious and not being so quick to judge a challenge or a difficulty as something bad. Acceptance is about letting a thing let you know its purpose without imposing upon it your script filled with would-haves, should-haves, and if-onlys. It's about resisting the need to be right instead of being happy, and sometimes it simply means going with the flow. Secondly, and paradoxically, we can also understand acceptance by looking at it in terms of what it is not. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It's not denial. It doesn't mean you have to like what is going on. It's not about railing against what shows up in your life when you don't like it or when something doesn't suit you. Nor is it about judging. Acceptance is a choice, albeit not an easy one, but a choice nevertheless, and it is our response to any given situation that determines what we will experience. There are always two ways to respond to any problem or difficulty. One is to accept what's happening, see the positive, and choose a peaceful state of mind. The other is to fight against it, be miserable, and struggle against the universe. Choosing acceptance does not mean choosing complacency. And let me clarify that acceptance is not at all related to weakness and is definitely not a synonym for conformity or mediocrity. It is also not the abdication of responsibility. We retain our sovereignty over all decisions in our lives as to whether or not to object, to persist, or to resist. What is important is whether or not we are attaching to a particular outcome. Whether it's a family loss, a missed opportunity, or a sudden change in plans. Being able to accept things that are outside of our control and to know the difference between what is and what is not helps us to maintain inner peace and happiness. Instead of staring at the closed door in front of us or getting tired and bruised while we try to break it down, let's turn around and see how many other windows are open around us. Acceptance is also a practice. Practicing acceptance prepares us to live in this changing world where we never know what's going to happen next, but where we can be prepared to take it on, no matter what. This is akin to living in the moment where we are the observer of what is taking place and able to respond rather than to react. Let's face it, part of the real beauty of life is that it's unpredictable. Nothing is permanent, everything changes, and of course a lot of things can happen that will transform who we are and have an impact on our lives. The challenge is cultivating the ability to truly accept whatever comes our way and embrace it. And of course, this means facing change and challenges. It's not easy to embrace them when we are suffering and when we often wish that some things would never have happened in our lives. But we can cultivate and practice acceptance in our lives. And when we do, we'll cope with future crises in a different way and from a viewpoint that has a different perspective. We can accept instead of resisting. Is everyone still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. This anonymous quote sums it up well. And I love this. Acceptance is key to converting momentary happiness to enduring happiness. It helps us to move from feeling happy to actually being happy. Finding the lesson or purpose behind a challenge will help us to embrace it instead of fighting against it, which in most cases only leads to more suffering. And let me stress that this suffering is self-created and it is avoidable. And understanding as we do that all of life is a choice, we can always choose peace over pain. Byron Katie talks about this in her book, Loving What Is. And she speaks of the importance of letting go the need to judge so that we don't attach to the people or things outside of ourselves, to people or things outside of ourselves. She says that as long as we think that the cause of our problems is out there, as long as we think that anyone or anything outside of ourselves is responsible for our suffering, the situation is hopeless. When we do this, it means we are forever in the role of victim and we are suffering in paradise. But it is not necessary for any of us to wait for people or situations to change in order to experience peace and harmony. And if the change you seek is not forthcoming right away or as soon as you would like, have the faith that in the perfect and right time, whatever it is that you need to know will be made known to you in one way or another. In the words of Holmes, stop trying, stop struggling, begin to be calm. Trust in the higher laws, even though you do not see them. They are still there. But perhaps the most powerful way to understand acceptance is to understand who we become when we are not accepting what is. Therefore, in order to illustrate this, I'm going to direct us again to the work of Byron Katie. There are 4 questions that she poses in her book that may help us to see that when we are not accepting what is, we are creating our own experience of suffering. Though we know this, it bears repeating. We are only ever limited by our own thinking. In the words of Katie, a thought is harmless unless we believe it. It is our thoughts, it is not our thoughts, but our attachment to our thoughts that causes suffering. So let's do a little exercise together right now, using the 4 questions of Katie's work. And these simple 4 questions have helped me when I've been stuck in self-defeating thinking or in my own willfulness. And though not the original intended purpose of Katie, for me they have served as a means to the end of acceptance of what is, because there is a shift in my thinking that occurs that allows me to reframe any troubling situation. So think of an issue that is troubling you, a situation or a person in your life that you view as a problem, either past or present, and formulate a statement in your mind right now. This statement could be about someone or something that angers, confuses, saddens, or disappoints you, or someone that you hope have not totally forgiven yet. For the purpose of this exercise that we will do together, I will use the example that Katie gives in her book. And as I guide you through the questions, please respond silently within your own mind. We will pause to allow time for reflection between each question. The statement for the example is, Paul doesn't listen to me. You can follow along using this one or one of your own. So let's just take a moment and take a deep breath now together and as we shift into this. And it might be more powerful if you close your eyes. So now to the questions. Question number 1, is it true? Ask yourself, is it true that Paul doesn't listen to me? As you ask yourself this question, be still. And if you really want to know the truth, the answer will rise to meet the question. There is no right or wrong answer. Let your mind ask the question and wait for the answer that surfaces. Is it true that Paul doesn't listen to me? Question number 2, is it really true? Ask yourself, is it really true that Paul doesn't listen to me? This answer is your own and can either be yes or no. But perhaps you can begin to see that it's not what is happening that is the problem. It's your thoughts about what is happening. So you might also ask yourself, when you ask the question, is it really true that Paul doesn't listen to me? Ask yourself, can I see a reason to drop this thought? Or can I find a stress-free reason to keep this thought? Question number 3. This is the one that helps me the most. How do you react when you think that thought? How do you react when you think the thought, Paul doesn't listen to me? Think about it this way. How do you treat Paul when you're believing that he's not listening? Do you interrupt him? Punish him by not paying attention? Do you give him the look? Do you talk faster and louder? And ponder also how you treat yourself. Do you shut down? Isolate? Eat and sleep a lot? Watch TV for days? Feel depressed and lonely? Notice all the effects of thinking the thought, Paul doesn't listen to me. And as you think about this, you might realize that what's true may be different from the story that you're telling yourself about it. Question number 4 and the final question. Who would you be without the thought? Consider who you would be if you couldn't think the thought, Paul doesn't listen to me. Keep your eyes closed and imagine Paul not listening to you. Imagine you don't have the thought that Paul doesn't listen, or even that he should listen. Take your time and notice what is revealed. What do you see? What do you feel? You may have discovered that it's your thoughts about the circumstances that are causing the problem. And if you had been able to accept without judging, you may have been able to avoid much of the turmoil that your statement, Paul doesn't listen to me, had been causing. You may open your eyes now when you're ready. And let's once more take a breath as we shift back into the energy of this room. Thank you. There's more to Katie's process, but for the purposes of today, of understanding the value of acceptance, I just hope this has been helpful. In closing, I ask, how are you meeting the experiences of your life? How is this working out for you? Are you cultivating what you desire, or something else which may or may not be serving you? Our life experience is not determined by what is happening in our lives, as much as it is by how we are meeting what is happening. But the points I've already made about this topic and about acceptance speak for themselves. My final point is one that may be obvious based on our teachings, but nevertheless very important to talk about. When we know that the universe is here to support us in every way, often doing so by knocking on our doors and challenging us with those spiritual 2x4s, when we relate to those as the gifts that they truly are, we can open to the portal of healing that occurs through the acceptance of all that is. And in doing so, we invite the all peace, all joy, all love that we seek into our lives on a permanent basis. When we start from the premise that it is all God, it is all good, and it is all for us, there is only one choice, and that is to accept all that is. When we know that everything that takes place in our lives is part of a bigger picture, a greater plan, when we know that it is all in divine right order, divinely guided, and that highest healing good is taking place no matter the appearance, when we know that it is all is exactly as it should be, then we have already accepted everything and everyone that comes our way. With this gift of acceptance, of the acceptance of all that is, my friends, also comes the gift of freedom. Just like with forgiveness, which we do for ourselves, so too is acceptance something that we do for ourselves. The ability to fully accept is born of and directly proportionate to our ability to know and trust that it really is all God. Ernest Holmes said this: peace comes from the absence of fear, from the consciousness of trust, from a deep underlying faith in the absolute goodness and mercy, the final integrity of the universe in which we live, and of every cause to which we give our thought, our time, and our attention. Will we continue to experience bumps in the road and be jostled and even jolted by them? Yes. But when we know that there is no separation, no duality, only good, and that it is all for us, when we embody this, when this is the basis of the belief system that undergirds our thinking and upholds our way of life, we will always be able ultimately to return to and to choose peace over pain, joy over sorrow, and love over fear. We can hold both the physical experience, the human, which is sometimes difficult, as well as the ideal of the divine, knowing that everything and everyone is of God, and this occurs at the intersection at which our construct of life is based upon acceptance. We are both and, able to hold both peace and pain at the same time. Acceptance occurs when we have the faith of God, when we know that there is an intelligence of which we are a part that is operating beyond the veil of our human understanding, and that through it, the purposes of greater good and highest healing are always being served. Is it really all God? Yes, it is, and so it is. Amen.
And as you gather your offering, please join me in saying the offertory blessing that's in your bulletin. I give this gift of abundance, aware that divine good flows through my life right now. I give with an open heart, knowing I